Over the last year or so, I've had quite a few people ask me about selling guitars. What are the best ways to sell them? What are the easiest ways to sell them? Do I have any tips? I'm not a guitar dealer. I don't buy and sell that many guitars, but literally over the course of being a professional musician, I've had to buy and sell guitars, and I've picked up a couple of tips that really make this process a lot easier. And through talking to a few friends and students, they've found some of these tips useful, so I thought I'd share them all to you as well, so that if you've got any guitars that you want to sell, then these tips will hopefully make that process a heck of a lot easier. So let's get into them. The first tip that I'd like to share with you when selling a guitar is that the price is everything. If you sell a piece of gear and you have it so that it's a little bit too high, then it could sit and sit and sit. If you have it so it's way too high, then people are not even going to make you offers. So yeah, this is kind of an interesting one, isn't it? Because in theory, what you could do is, if you really wanted to get a certain price for a guitar, then that can happen if you're really prepared to kind of wait it out, you know. So if you've got maybe a niche piece of gear and you really want a certain price for it, then you could wait, you know, months and months. But most people, you know, tend to be a little bit more impatient, and they usually sell a piece of gear because they need to fund something else most of the time. So an example of this would be that I recently sold a Music Man amp to a friend and a subscriber of mine and a student. And before that, I had this particular amp listed at a certain price. And the funny thing is that when I dropped the amp price by £50, which is about $60 or $70, all of a sudden I had like 3 or 4 people that were just adamant on buying that particular amp. And luckily it went to you know, a local student and friend, so I know exactly where that amp is because it's a good amp. But it was kind of a lesson for me that even just by £50, lowering that piece of gear by £50 kind of helped to sell so much quicker than the initial price which I paid for it. So yeah, price really is everything when you're wanting to sell a guitar. The second piece of advice that I'd like to share with you is that you should always ship or post your guitars. I know it's a bit of an effort, isn't it? You've got to kind of find a guitar box, or if you're selling an amp, you've got a big box, you've got to package it all up, you've got to make sure it's well packaged and it's safe, and you've got to find a good courier service and all that. But if you want something to get, you know, if you want to get a fair price for something that you're selling and you want it to be gone quicker, then I would always recommend trying to sell your guitar with postage. It will definitely help it move. So an example of that, which recently happened with me, was that I used to have an Eastman AR610, I think it was. It was the acoustic archtop Eastman, a really nice guitar actually, and I was selling this for a friend. And with that particular guitar, the friend wasn't that keen on shipping it just because of its nature. It had a carved top and it was a little bit fragile. Although looking back, I wouldn't be so hesitant to do that now. So long story short, I listed that guitar on the usual places: Facebook Marketplace, eBay, Gumtree, etc., all as a local sale. And basically that guitar took about 3 or 4 months to sell before someone finally wanted to kind of, you know, make a local deal to buy the guitar. However, in the process of that 3 or 4 months, we had several offers in which buyers were trying to get me to ship the guitar and make a deal. And, you know, from what I remember, the price would have been a little bit higher as well if we would have posted that guitar. So yeah, I know it's a bit of a hassle, but usually you can get kind of guitar boxes maybe from a guitar shop. I know that you can buy them online for £5 or £10, which might seem quite a lot of money just for some cardboard, but the value which it could add to your sale, I think, would definitely outweigh the price of what a guitar box would be. So tip number 2 would be always to post your guitars to get the quickest sale and probably the most money too. The third tip is to always include original parts if possible. People can be really funny about this actually. They can make or break our deal, sometimes they cannot. I suppose it really depends on the situation. But a couple of examples that I've had was that I was selling an amp one time, and the amp speaker had been upgraded from what the original speaker was in this particular amp, and it wasn't a vintage amp or anything like that. And the amp usually comes with a foot switch. And for any of us that have ever used amps, we know that we really don't ever use the foot switch, or at least I never have. We tend to use pedals, or if you're playing jazz, then usually it just kind of is a clean sound for at least straight ahead jazz. But yeah, over the last couple of years, I've lost potential buyers by not having a foot switch for an amp. That was one example. And another example was a guitar that I was going to sell, a Strat, which I didn't sell anyway. I actually upgraded the saddles at one point to Graphtec saddles, which were much better than the original saddles that came on the guitar, because at the time I was playing a lot of blues and I always used to snap the strings, which is why I upgraded the saddles in the first place. And I do think that that buyer would have still been fine buying the guitar with the upgraded saddles, but it was certainly, you know, something that worked against me. And, you know, a lesson there on my part was that I have no idea what happened to those saddles. I don't think that I still have them. I think I just gave them to the person that put the new saddles on. So yeah, given hindsight, if you ever upgrade anything about your guitar, try to keep the original pickups, the original parts, even if they're not as good, because number one, you can always revert the guitar back to its original condition or state, and number two, if you don't want to do that, you can always include them with the sale, which buyers tend to be a little bit happier about. The next tip that I found from selling guitars and amps is that you don't always get what you put in. So if you modify or upgrade a guitar in terms of the pickups, if you get it refretted, all these kind of things don't always add to the value, and if they do add to the value, they don't add much. So I always like to, you know, people always ask me, should I change the pickup, should I do this, should I do that? Well, you know, if you like it and you intend on keeping it in the long term, then that's cool. But you know, you see some kind of crazy listings sometimes of things like Telecasters which have got, you know, upgraded specs and stuff, and you think, well, you know, that might add some value to the guitar, but say if the cost of the pickups and the electronics is this much, it definitely doesn't add that much to the base price of the guitar in my experience. It might add some, particularly on guitars which have bad electrics or bad pickups, but certainly not what you put into it. So always consider that if you're selling. If you kind of want to get, you know, a price for your guitar, then you're probably not going to get what you've got in it if you've upgraded it and you put all these modifications on, even if they are upgrades. So that is one thing to bear in mind also. That concludes the tips for selling guitars in this video. I hope that they help you out if you've got any guitars to sell. If you have any more tips that you'd like to add to the discussion, then please share them in the comment section below. And if you'd like more videos like this, then please subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.